Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OPT Network. This morning on Point, we're talking about our senior parents and people who are aging. And here's what the statistics say. It says that more than 10,000 people in the United States turn 65 every day, and 90% of those people are seniors in their own homes, and they want to spend their waning years in their own home. And 65 on its face is not very old. But of course, as we're aging, we have to begin to have the conversation with our parents about living and their care. Here to talk about this important conversation that so many of us are having is Lynda Shrager. She is an occupational therapist. She has been in the field of geriatric rehabilitation for more than 37 years, and she focuses on all aspects of health and wellness. Now, she combines her expertise as an occupational therapist, a master's level social worker, a professional organizer, and a certified aging in place specialist. So if that's not enough qualifications to help us to figure it out, I don't know what is. Lynda joins us this morning to talk about her new book. It's entitled, quite simply, Age in Place. All the way from Albany, New York, we welcome Lynda to the OPT Network. Lynda, good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
Oh, man, this is a lot to unpack. So let's start with all of the calls that you get probably on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that people are saying, Lynda, my parent fell, or, the home is an accident waiting to happen. We need to have the conversation, but nobody really wants to have it. What do you say to those people?
Okay, well, first of all, what I've tried to say to those people all along is that they should have had the conversation before the crisis occurred. So you're right. I get the call that Dad broke his hip. He's in the hospital. Mom is toddling around the house. She's alone, and now what do we do? And there are things that can be done, but as I said, the first thing that I tell people who are not quite there yet, have the conversation before this happens. That's the biggest message in my book. Get everybody together while everybody's feeling well, before the house is so overwhelming that they can't handle it, and sit down and say, let's make a plan. What do you want to do, Mom and Dad? What are your goals for staying in the house, and how can we help you to meet those goals? Unfortunately, as I said, though, that doesn't often happen.
Right. Nobody's really having that conversation, Lynda, because when everybody is up and feeling well and moving, I think we kind of bury our heads in the sand, and we want to think that that's always going to happen. So how should we approach that conversation? Because nobody wants to forebode a fall or something happening. So how do we start the conversation?
Well, you're absolutely right. And what happens is the kids will all say to Mom and Dad, how you doing? And the answer is always, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine.
Right.
So you're right. Nobody wants to have this conversation ahead of time. So what I suggest to the kids is to make a plan to go to Mom and Dad's home and just start observing. So as I say in the book, get your inner Sherlock Holmes on and go over there and just spend time with them and watch how they get around the house.
Mm-hmm.
Watch how they literally get from outside of the house into the house, first of all, because that's often the first stumbling block. And then how do they do in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the living room? Are they making meals? Are they dealing with managing the home? And this is not a one-time thing. This is not, go over for one dinner and then leave and try to make these conclusions. This will take many visits. But after you've made the visit, and also it's nice to have, if there's more than one child in the family, for everybody to do this, not just one poor kid, but you've made all your observations, then is the time to say, okay, Mom and Dad, we want to sit down, we want to have a conversation. Now, again, that conversation is not something that we want to make when they're in the emergency room.
Right.
We want to make it at the kitchen table. And that's the best time to have this conversation. So now you've determined, you've gotten your evidence in tow, and you sit down and you talk to mom and dad about what their wishes are in the first place for remaining in the house. Let's remember one important thing. Most often, your parents still, if they're cognitively intact, the bottom line is it's their decision. We can only suggest. We cannot tell them what to do. They are grown-ups, and they have the right to self-determination.
And one of the things that you write about in the book is allowing your parents that independence and that autonomy. And sometimes don't we forget, especially as we have become adults, that they're still adults and we're not the parents to our adult parents.
That's exactly right. And there's people who write articles and books, and I see this all the time. I'll open the New York Times or whatever, how we parent our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that always upsets me because you know what? We are not parenting our parents. Our parents are parenting us, and they're going to be till the day we die. And that's important to give them that respect that they deserve.
And don't you think that that's where the breakdown happens at, though, Lynda, when we try to assert ourselves as all-knowing?
Exactly. So the way to go at it is more, I suggest to people to say, look, I'm your kid, and I'm worried about you. I'm worried what might happen if a fall occurs. I don't even know your financial situation or where you keep your important records. I might not even know who your attorney is or who your accountant is. These are the kinds of things that worry me, Dad, because I think if something were to happen to you unexpectedly, I would not be able to help you in the best way that I could. So for me and for my peace of mind, I would like to sit down with you and have this conversation. And sort of you're putting it on yourself so that it's your worry or that mom and dad do this for us. Help us out because we want what's best for you. And, the thing is, in this situation, I'm not telling kids that they have to sit down and tell mom and dad, we're moving you to the nursing home or we're packing you up and you're going to assisted living. The beauty of this is that we are helping mom and dad to meet their own goal of staying home.
Right.
So it should not be too tough of a situation because what we're doing is we're sitting down to have this conversation so that we can all meet in the middle and help mom and dad to stay right in their own home.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the first thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a break here. But when we come back, we want to talk about how we can see if that is a feasible goal. And if it is, kind of help to reorganize. The book is called Age in Place, A Guide to Modifying, Organizing, and Decluttering Mom and Dad's Home. Stay on point. We're going to break, but we'll be back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Lynda Shrager. She is an occupational therapist, social worker, certified aging in place specialist, and an organized caregiver. Her book is entitled Age in Place, A Guide to Modifying, Organizing, and Decluttering Mom and Dad's Home. Now, as we talk about having the conversation, Lynda, as we did in the last segment, and a lot of people are still trying to wrap their heads around how they can have that conversation and really make it so that it's their parents' idea as opposed to their idea and work through it. So I think that in itself is going to take some time, just over time having the conversation, that it's not going to be just one conversation.
That's actually very, very true. It isn't just one conversation. This whole situation is an ongoing kind of a thing. And we want to spend time with our parents because that's really the way that we can find out how it's going. And so, what do we look for when we're walking through the house? You want to look for a pattern of neglect, which that could be something that could raise a red flag that things aren't going that well. So, for example, if, mom and dad are driving, do they get lost driving home? Do they not recognize familiar objects? Are they doing unsafe things such as leaving the oven or stove on? That could be a problem. I joke when I do talks in the community, I say, losing our keys, we all do that, but finding them in the refrigerator, that could be trouble. So you want to look at their behavior and see, exactly how they're doing. And for example, go into the kitchen. Are they not cooking their favorite foods? That's often a sign. If they're famous for their spaghetti sauce and all of a sudden they're taking it out of a jar, is it because physically they don't have it in them to make the spaghetti sauce anymore, or cognitively they can't follow the recipe? So that's a sign. Or look at the pantry. Is it full or not? Do they have a lot of fresh food, or is it a lot of frozen food in the freezer, which is an indication, again, that they're having trouble getting to the grocery store, or they're having trouble making meals? Do the pots and pans seem burned? Do you think that they're having, are there spills on the floor that look like they're having problems managing the cooking? And then you want to look at mom and dad themselves. Do you notice any body odors, which might be an indication that they're having trouble getting in the shower? That is very common. I find that in situations all the time where they are scared to get in the shower, which makes a lot of sense since that's where most falls occur in the home, and so they're avoiding the showering. So that's something that we want to keep an eye on. So are the bills, piling up? Is the mail all piled up? Very, very important thing to look at are the pills. Are they managing their medication? Very, very important because, of course, as you can imagine, if they can't do that, that could lead to a lot of problems.
Absolutely.
So we need to make sure that that's in order.
So, Lynda, once we see the signs that you have laid out, and I know that there are people who are listening and watching that are saying to themselves, yes, I'm seeing those signs. What should I do?
Well, the first thing to do is look for the immediate safety concerns. So, for example, if mom has a recliner and you notice that there's a lot of clutter in the pathway between the recliner and the bathroom, that's something that we immediately have to take care of. And that's when maybe we just have to kind of be a little more aggressive than normal and say, look, Mom, you need to have a safe path from here to the bathroom, and I'm going to take away this pile of newspapers and the books that have piled up and that type of thing so that you have a clear path, because it's very important that you can get from here to there and not have a fall. So the obvious things that really need to be taken care of, if you can do those first, that's important. As I mentioned before, most falls happen in the bathroom. And if you feel that they are, as an occupational therapist, I always insist that grab bars be put up in the shower. I just feel that it makes all the difference in the world. So I would suggest that they have the correct grab bars put up so that when they're getting in and out, they have something to hold on to. And so those are some of the modifications that you could do right away. But then, for example, if we feel that they're getting a little confused or if there is a little cognitive issue there, a simple thing to do is create visual prompts and reminders. So, for example, in my book, I have a picture of a bathroom, and in the medicine cabinet, there are containers, and there is a label on each container: razor, toothbrush, toothpaste, etc. And it's just a little, as a matter of fact, the person drew a little picture, like kind of a stick figure with a little man shaving. So to show Dad that that's where his shaving materials are. So visual prompts such as that, a picture in the kitchen outside of the cabinet or on a drawer that depicts what's inside. Or reminder notes. I do this all the time with my patients. I will literally put a little Post-it note, I'm very big on Post-it notes, that say, turn off oven, or take your pills. And sometimes something as simple as that can really make the difference. Just something visually. And I'll tell you something, Carlette, I have Post-it notes all over my house. on my dashboard in my car.
I do too.
Because I need to remind myself what I have to do. So it's not all about age all the time.
Sure. And so let's talk about those families that need to intervene. They need to bring in, say, an occupational therapist, or they need to bring in some type of sitting service because maybe there was a stroke, or maybe there was a fall, or something going on with a parent, and the parent is absolutely wanting no part of that. How do we defend that?
Well, this is often the case. When we decide that we need to have a caregiving team in place, sometimes that is difficult to get those right people in there. And first of all, though, in building the helpers, if you will, or the team, it is helpful to start with family members because that is who mom and dad are most familiar with and comfortable with. But it doesn't necessarily have to be just the kids. There's nieces and nephews. I suggest that people use grandchildren. Grandchildren can be very helpful in just sort of hanging out with mom and dad, kind of keeping an eye on them, but more visiting with them, doing activities with them. Maybe somebody can mow the lawn. Maybe somebody can help straighten up the kitchen. Sometimes maybe the granddaughter can help grandma get dressed. So this is a good group of potential caregivers that we don't often think of might be able to be useful. Also, maybe neighbors. Neighbors are really helpful. They're really great with what are called IADLs, instrumental activities of daily living, which are things like the mail and the getting the newspaper, taking the garbage out. That becomes very difficult for people. And so, to ask the guy across the street, you know, when you take your garbage down the driveway, could you do me a favor and grab my mom's garbage pail and bring that down, and then at the end of the day bring it back up? Or could you grab their mail out and bring it up to their front door? So that are people who can help and who, are in the neighborhood. Most of the time, mom and dad already know them. The other group of people to call upon are people in their faith community. And many times, synagogues and churches have groups that have been compiled just for that reason, to help people who are elderly, who are home, to help them stay at home. And one other thing, the person to add to the team always is the handyman. Very important for when it's time to get that grab bar up.
So it sounds like, Lynda, if people are going through this right now, that you have to start building a team, and you have to be very strategic about that.
Exactly. And these are the people who are on the team. And what happens is, I find that when there's more than one kid, sometimes they all don't agree. So that's where we have to start, is to get all the kids on the same page. And often what happens is a couple of the kids are local, but then there's some who are out of town. And so getting those kids on board is very important also, so that they're part of it. And I'll hear many times that the local kid says, you know, it's all on me, and my sister lives halfway across the country, and my brother is the other half of the country, and nobody's helping me. But I say to that person, you have to really get organized. When you're organizing a team, what you're doing is making a list of everything that needs to be done for mom and dad, and then handing out jobs, if you will. And for that brother who lives across the country and kind of says, oh, wish I could be there, but I live across the country, right, you say, oh, no, you can be in charge of all the online financial stuff.
Very good. Hold that thought for me, Lynda. Hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about just what Lynda is saying, how we delegate and it doesn't fall on one child as the caretaker. Stay on point. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, we're having a very important conversation that maybe you haven't had yet, But guess what? If you have parents or aunts and uncles who are aging and you're going to probably be responsible for their care, this is a conversation that you absolutely must be on point for. Our guest is Lynda Shrager. Her book is called Age in Place, A Guide to Modifying, Organizing, and Decluttering Mom and Dad's Home. And before we went to break, Lynda, we were talking about building that team and then delegating, because that person that is in the city or in the town that mom and dad or mom or dad live in, really the burden, and sometimes it can become a burden. Nobody ever really wants to say that, but the weight, let me call it that, the weight does get heavy for that one person.
Yes, it does. Well, and the way to deal with that is to not take all the weight. You've heard over and over again the term caregiver burnout.
Yes.
And that's what happens when one person tries to do all of this. So it is very, very important to try to delegate some of these jobs. And as we were saying, you do have to think outside the box a little bit. You have the sibling who lives far away, and there's so many things that can be done online these days with paying bills and even making all of the doctor's appointments, creating the calendar. And I'll tell you, as old as they may be, between the doctors and between this and that, they have a lot of things that have to be kept in order. And so just keeping a calendar for mom and dad, and that can be done, you can make a Google document and everybody on the team can be a part of it and write on it live right then and there. So there's things like that. So for the one in the family who's good with technology, that's their job. And you take someone who, I say to people, it's hard to ask for help, but many times when we're dealing with an elderly parent, we might even have friends who say, how can I help? How can I help?
Right.
And you're afraid to ask them, but really, if you ask them to do one little thing, like take mom to the doctor next Tuesday at 11, and your friend who really isn't overwhelmed with too many things, to ask them to do that one thing, they're so happy to help you. But you, who have had to take off work 5 times already because you have to keep taking mom to the doctor, this is such a great thing for you. So make specific lists of things that need to be done, and then ask your friends if they can just take one little task, which for them will not be overwhelming, but for you, if you're doing it all, will be very overwhelming. So spread out the jobs amongst a lot of people. And if you, for some reason, don't have help, let's say you are the only child and there's no help around, then sometimes you need to think of a geriatric care manager, which is a professional. They are most often social workers. They are people who do this for a living. They will go in and manage the situation, take mom and dad to doctor's offices, call doctors for them, and call in their medications and do all of those things. So literally, if you have no one to help you, there are professionals. And then, of course, there's nothing wrong with calling on a home care agency. They have people who are certified home care assistants. They come into your home, and maybe you're going to have them 2 or 3 times a week to help give mom and dad a shower, to make a meal for mom and dad. Those are great tasks for the home care agency. And I'm all for bringing in bringing in help.
Absolutely. And I think, the whole idea of it can be so overwhelming. And what I love in the book is that with your great organizational skills and having done this for so long, you really lay out, step by step, what people can do so that their parents or their loved ones can remain in their home for conceivably as long as they can.
Exactly. And that's what I've always done with all of my different areas of treatment, is to use the concept of organizing. Because in my opinion, if you're organized and you have it written down and planned out, it's not all floating around in your head overwhelming you. And there's so many jobs and tasks and worries and thoughts that are in there in your head, keeping you up all night, that you can't move on and function. So the most important thing for anybody in this situation is A, take a deep breath, And B, just sit down, look at the total situation, take a look at the house, have the conversation with the family, have the conversation with mom and dad, certainly deal with any emergent, unsafe situations right away, but then it's okay to take your time and figure out room to room what modifications may need to be made, and then what extra help might need to be brought in, and make a big calendar. I call it command central, one place in the house, one table or one desk where all the information is, the big calendar and who's coming and who's going and the list of all the people involved and all their phone numbers and their contact information, the list of medications, a healthcare notebook, which I talk about in the book, how to make one of those, and right in the house where everyone knows. I just had a family the other day. They have 17 children. This woman had 17 children.
Wow.
And God bless them. They made the kitchen table command central because who knows who's doing. So they walk in and they know, go right to that table, and everything is there. All the appointments, all the jobs, all the tasks, and it was great. So get organized, and, it takes a village. It really does.
Indeed.
But it's very, very possible to help mom and dad stay safe in their home.
And so here's what I want you to talk about before we've got to let you go, because often it's hard to help your parents declutter, especially I know one of my friend's parents was really overcome with clutter, almost to the point of being a hoarder. And somebody has to come in and say, and this is where we don't want to parent our parent, but maybe you have to be a little bit more assertive, if you will, to say, some of this stuff has got to go because it's just not safe. How do you help their parents get rid of stuff that they've had for years or that they just don't want to get rid of?
That's such a good question. And this is the way to do it. First of all, sometimes when you're getting the pushback from mom and dad about a certain item that they say, no, I have to have this. What I suggest to people is to talk about that item with them and try to get to the nature of the attachment to the object, because often it's the nature of the attachment that makes it hard to part with. So, for example, ask them, what is the meaning behind this object? Tell me the story, Mom, about this tool set that was Grandpa's. And, tell me the story about each of these things. Because often it's the memory that's so important to them, not the object itself. So that if you can get them to sort of talk about the memory and remember the memory, it becomes a little bit easier to part with the object. And, they need to have a goal for decluttering, and hopefully, and even if it's just to get around my house easier,
right.
Once you have that goal, you can ask them some questions. Look at this object. What's the likelihood that you're going to need it again? Would somebody else benefit from having it? Maybe a special person can have it right now, and I can give it to them. And how would my life change if I did get rid of this? And the most important question that often works the best is, what is the absolute worst thing that could happen if I get rid of this? And often they'll realize that, maybe it's not so bad, because the follow-up question to that is, if I need it again in the future, could I get it? And most of the time the answer is yes.
Right.
So you try to go through, item by item with them, and I suggest that you start in a room, one room at a time, one bite at a time. You can't have this huge house that is full of stuff and say, we're going to come through and declutter it this weekend.
Right.
It's better to take a little tiny area, one that they're in a lot, though, so that when it is all nice and clean and decluttered, it gives them a visual feedback of how successful that was. And say, you know what, Mom, I'm coming over. We're going to work on the closet in the den for 2 hours. We're not going to stop. We're just going to go in there, and we're going to work on that closet. And you'll see that if you break it down into tasks such as that, into little pieces, that you can get a lot done.
It's an incredible book, and you're doing amazing work, Lynda, and we just thank you so much for having the insight to write this book. It's entitled Age in Place, A Guide to Modifying, Organizing, and Decluttering Mom and Dad's Home. Before you got to go, give people your website and the information on how they can pick this. It's not just a book, Lynda. It's a guide. It's a guide that every single family should pick up.
Well, thank you so much. I hope that your message goes out to a lot of people. And for more information on everything, my website is otherwisehealthy.com. And I have a Facebook page, The Organized Caregiver. And I suggest everybody like that page because I put up tips and articles and links to all of these interviews up there every day. So that's The Organized Caregiver on Facebook and otherwisehealthy.com.
All right, Lynda, thank you so much. We want to remind people, keep them safe and keep you sane. It's been a great conversation. Thank you again, Lynda. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Carlette.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Lynda Stock, and this is our final point today on Point.
Our guest this morning is someone that has mounds of experience with helping people stay in their home and be able to regulate and function. The book is called Age in Place. But we know that even though this conversation makes all the sense in the world, to try to start figuring out a plan before something happens, most people just don't have the wherewithal to do that.
Well, we never want to be the child that takes our parents' independence away from them.
Right.
And so this conversation unto itself feels that way to us, you know, when we see the needs and we start, as our author talks about, we began to go to their homes and we recognize the changes that are occurring in their habits and, you know, their eating habits and how they're taking care of the house and things.
And their bodies.
Yes, and that are different, you know. And having gone through this with both David's mom and my mom, I can tell you it is an incredibly painful journey. It is, because you want so bad to help them stay at home, because we know that's the number one desire. At the same time, in David's mom's case, she lived in Kansas City, you know. We lived here. I mean, it was a bad situation in terms of just the distance. And he had one brother who lived there, a single man who did everything that he could, but it became painfully obvious as hers was stages of Alzheimer's that we had to get in-home help.
Right.
And, you know, I think that may sound like an easy solution, but I can tell you when you start interviewing people that you know you need them to be compatible with who they're going to start living with, basically. It is, if you think finding the right employee is tough, let me tell you how hard that job is.
Oh, yeah.
Because all of those folks come with a whole set of rules and baggage as well, you know, because they've been doing this, you know, and they know the pitfalls to it. But it certainly is not a topic that you can just sweep under the rug. It has to be dealt with. And, you know, fortunately for myself, all siblings involved, both on David's side, and then when my mom had her cataract surgery and one of her eyes, it didn't work, and she ended up having to have her eye removed. That was kind of the turning point for her. But it is.
Were y'all thinking about a plan at that, you know, when did you start thinking about the plan?
I think once she had to have the surgery, she kept having trouble with this eye. And that had begun to limit her mobility and her ability to drive and, you know, things that normally were very, very status quo to Mom because she was pretty healthy otherwise. But when it kind of manifested itself that indeed she was not going to be able, you know, to drive, period, and that her limitations, she began to recognize. So we were fortunate in terms of Mom's situation to see that she was going to need more help than probably she had needed in the past. But it's still the journey of what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do they come to live with one of us? Do they go to a home? Do we do, you know? In her scenario, it was assisted living, which fortunately we found a wonderful place that was there that had still allowed my siblings who lived in that area to, you know, go see her. But there were stages that Mom went through when she made that change that caused her to feel resentment, you know, and naturally, because, you know, she didn't have all of her pictures she used to have around her, and she didn't have all the dishes, and, you know, so her downsizing had become just a mere shell of her life.
Wow.
And that's tough.
Yeah,
you know, that's tough.
Yes.
When you start taking away those things we hold dear to us, sometimes that makes our life what it is.
And there's no place like your place.
No place like home.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so this is a hard conversation. And as you said, even when you do it and the situation seems like it makes all the sense in the world, you still have to deal with a lot of emotion, a lot of pain, a lot of anger. But here's what Lynda is saying. She's saying, let's try to do it while everything is good. If we have these conversations while the person is still mobile, still, you know, doing all of the things in their daily lives that they've been able to do, maybe if and when, and not everybody, but those people that will have to make that transition, maybe it'll be easier because it will be on their terms.
And that's definitely something to not be ignored.
Right.
However, the reality sometimes is this, and I've said it, you will say it if you haven't said it, the last place we want to be is put into a nursing home.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, sometimes the reality is that is the only resort. And promises get made back in the healthy days.
Right.
Promises get made of, well, no, we would never do that, and that will never happen. And the intentions there are great.
Good. Mm-hmm.
But the reality sometimes of what we can and cannot do in a real world manifests itself. So there's just no easy solution. I do agree with our author talking about it, getting some form of a plan, getting some sense of agreement early on, as early as possible, but realizing the real world situations, because as a sibling, your scenario changes also, along with their life changing. And so as your scenario changes, hence your capabilities change.
Absolutely.
So it's not just one person involved, and that's what makes this challenge so complex.
Complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a very, very good book, one that we would encourage every single person that's dealing with this issue or about to deal with it to pick it up. It's called Age in Place, but we are out of time for now. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Lynda Stock, and this has been our final point today on Point.
Stay with us, everybody. We're back to wrap up and tell you how you can get the book. Stay on point.